Something is happening right now that almost no one is connecting the dots on. At this very moment, today, the governments of China, Saudi Arabia, India, and the United States are quietly, urgently repositioning their long-term economic strategies around one single variable. Not oil, not rare earth minerals, not artificial intelligence, water. And there is one country on this planet that holds more of it than anyone else. One country that is sitting on a resource so vast, so irreplaceable, and so desperately needed right now that the world's most respected resource economists have put a single number on its value: $50 trillion. That is not a typo, $50 trillion. More than the combined GDP of the United States and China. More than every barrel of oil Saudi Arabia has ever pumped out of the ground since the industry began. And that country, the one holding all of this, is Canada. Here's the part that should make every Canadian stop cold. The world has already started moving. Investment is already flowing. Decisions about where to build the next generation of factories, farms, and energy systems are being made right now. And water availability is the number one factor driving those decisions. Canada keeps coming out on top, and most Canadians have absolutely no idea. Welcome to Canada Economy, where we track the real forces shaping Canada's financial future and global position before they hit the mainstream. If you want to understand where Canada is actually headed, subscribe right now. Because what we are about to walk through changes how you see this country completely. To understand why Canada's position is so extraordinary right now, you first have to understand what is happening to the rest of the world. And it is not pretty. Over 2 billion people on this planet currently live in conditions of serious water stress, not future projections, not modeled scenarios. Right now, today, more than 2 billion people do not have reliable access to clean fresh water. Chennai, a city of 10 million people in southern India, ran completely dry. The government had to truck water in from hundreds of kilometers away, while residents lined up for hours just to fill buckets. This happened in a modern city in one of the world's fastest growing economies. Cape Town in South Africa came within 3 days of becoming the first major city in modern history to completely shut off its municipal water supply. The government had a name for the day it was going to happen. They called it Day Zero. The Colorado River in the United States, the water source for 7 states, tens of millions of people, and some of the most productive farmland on Earth, has been shrinking for decades. Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States, dropped to its lowest level since it was first filled in the 1930s. The U.S. government declared an official water shortage on that river for the very first time in its entire managed history. In 2022, Europe experienced its worst drought in 500 years. France rationed drinking water in rural communities. Italy declared a national emergency. The Rhine River dropped so low that cargo barges could not navigate it, disrupting the supply chains of an entire continent. And northern China, home to hundreds of millions of people and the industrial engine of the world's second largest economy, is running critically low on groundwater. The Yellow River, the birthplace of Chinese civilization, now runs completely dry before it even reaches the sea for parts of the year. Now add this on top of everything else. The global population is heading toward 10 billion people by 2050. Agricultural demand for water is projected to rise 30%. Industrial demand is accelerating, and the total supply of clean, usable, accessible fresh water on this planet, it is shrinking. This is not a future problem. This is the present reality. The crisis is not coming, it is already here, and right in the middle of all of it, sitting quietly, almost accidentally at the center of the solution, is Canada. Now here is where things get interesting, because the numbers behind Canada's water position are not just large. They are almost impossible to fully comprehend. Canada holds approximately 20% of the world's entire surface freshwater supply. 20% in one country with 40 million people. The Great Lakes alone, shared between Canada and the United States, contain roughly 21% of all the surface freshwater on Earth. That single connected system of lakes holds more fresh water than the entire continent of South America. Quebec's James Bay watershed is one of the largest undisturbed freshwater ecosystems remaining anywhere on the planet. Ontario borders 4 of the 5 Great Lakes. British Columbia is fed by glacier rivers producing some of the cleanest, most mineral-rich water found anywhere in the world. Alberta sits on portions of one of North America's most significant underground aquifer systems. And then there is Canada's north, the Yukon, Northwest Territories, Nunavut, where water reserves are so vast and so untouched that comprehensive measurement has never even been completed. Global resource economists look at this picture and arrive at that number we mentioned at the start, $50 trillion, a conservative, long-term estimate of the strategic and economic value of what Canada holds, larger than the combined annual GDP of the United States and China, greater than the total value of every barrel of oil ever extracted from Saudi Arabia since the industry began. But here's what truly makes Canada's position different from every other water-rich region on Earth. And this is the part most people miss entirely. Canada's water systems are not just enormous, they are durable. Unlike tropical watersheds being destroyed by deforestation, unlike Himalayan glacier systems retreating rapidly under rising temperatures, unlike American Midwest aquifers being emptied far faster than nature can replenish them, Canada's water is fed by snowpack, ancient geology, consistent rainfall patterns, and ecosystems that have been building for thousands of years. In a world where water systems are becoming less reliable almost everywhere, Canada's hold firm. And in the economics of scarcity, durability is not just valuable, it is everything. Now here is where this story gets genuinely extraordinary. And this is what most people are completely missing about Canada's real economic position. Canada does not need to export a single drop of water to become the dominant water economy of the 21st century. Think carefully about what water actually makes possible in a modern economy. You cannot grow food without it. You cannot manufacture semiconductor chips without it. A single modern fabrication plant uses millions of gallons of ultra-pure water every single day. You cannot produce green hydrogen, the clean fuel that Europe, Japan, and South Korea are betting their entire energy transitions on, without splitting water molecules using renewable electricity. You cannot cool a data center without constant, reliable water supply. You cannot process the lithium and cobalt that go into every electric vehicle battery without enormous quantities of water. Water is not just a resource. It is the invisible foundation that every single industry, the global economy, is racing to build right now sits on top of. And as that foundation cracks in most parts of the world, Canada's holds firm. This gives Canada an offer that no other country on Earth can currently match. Come here, build here, operate here. Because we have something you cannot find anywhere else at this scale. Clean, reliable, abundant fresh water, guaranteed for decades. And companies are already responding. Amazon, Google, and Microsoft have been consistently and quietly expanding their Canadian data center infrastructure. These are not coincidental decisions. These are companies with century-long infrastructure planning horizons. They understand exactly what Canada's water position means for their long-term operating costs, and they are acting on it now before the competition catches up. Semiconductor companies evaluating locations for their next generation of fabrication plants, the multi-billion-dollar facilities producing chips that power artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, and every smartphone on the planet, are listing water security among their top 3 site selection criteria. Canadian cities keep appearing on those shortlists. The green hydrogen opportunity may be the largest single play in this entire picture. Green hydrogen is produced by using renewable electricity to split water. It can power heavy industry, long-distance shipping, and aviation in ways that batteries simply cannot. The European Union has publicly committed to importing massive quantities of it. Japan and South Korea are building entire national energy strategies around it. Producing green hydrogen at scale requires 2 things in abundance: renewable electricity and fresh water. Canada has some of the world's largest hydroelectric capacity. It has vast wind and solar potential across millions of square kilometers, and it has essentially unlimited fresh water. Canada could become the Saudi Arabia of clean energy. The raw ingredients are already here. Now let's talk about who is paying close attention to Canada's water position right now, because the list tells you everything about where this is heading. Saudi Arabia has spent the past decade quietly purchasing hundreds of thousands of acres of agricultural land across the United States, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Behind every one of those purchases is the same logic. Land means water access. As Gulf states build their post-oil economic frameworks, food and water security has become a strategic obsession at the highest levels of government. Canada's land and water will enter that calculation. The only real question is on whose terms. China's water situation is one of the most consequential and underreported strategic vulnerabilities in global geopolitics. Northern China is running critically short on groundwater. The government has spent hundreds of billions of dollars on massive internal water transfer infrastructure, essentially a plumbing system across an entire continent. But internal redistribution has limits. China needs external water security, and Canada is being watched with a level of attention that most Canadians would find deeply uncomfortable if they fully understood it. India's situation may be the most urgent of all. 18% of the world's population, 4% of its fresh water, groundwater being depleted at rates that scientists describe as flatly unsustainable, major cities already experiencing crisis conditions, an economy industrializing at speed, which means water demand accelerating sharply in exactly the years when supply is most constrained. India's long-term planners are thinking about global water access with a seriousness the Canadian public has never been asked to appreciate. And then there is the United States, Canada's most important relationship, and in this particular story, its most complex one. The North American Water and Power Alliance was a serious engineering proposal from the 1960s that envisioned redirecting billions of gallons from Canadian and Alaskan river systems southward into the American West. It was shelved at the time. Too expensive, too politically complicated. But as Lake Mead drops, as California farmland goes fallow, as American cities face the simple arithmetic of too many people and not enough water, those old plans are being pulled back out of the drawer in Washington. Canada has legal frameworks restricting bulk water exports. But legal frameworks live inside political realities. And as economic and diplomatic pressure from the South intensifies, those frameworks will be tested in ways they have never been tested before. This is where Canada's story shifts from fascinating to genuinely urgent. Let's bring this down from the global level to what it actually means for Canada's economy in practical, tangible terms. Start with agriculture, because this is where the transformation is already underway. California's Central Valley, one of the most productive farming regions in human history, is watching its water disappear. Crops that defined that economy for over a century are no longer economically viable. Farms are being abandoned. That production does not simply vanish. It has to move somewhere. Somewhere with the land, the soil, the climate, and the water to do it reliably. Canada's prairie provinces check every single one of those boxes. The opportunity to absorb a meaningful portion of North American food production is real. It is significant, and it is already beginning to happen. The revenue and employment implications for Canadian agricultural communities across Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba are enormous. High-tech manufacturing is the second major wave incoming. Every major semiconductor company in the world is currently evaluating where to build its next generation of fabrication plants. Each plant represents billions in investment and thousands of high-wage jobs. Water security has moved from a secondary consideration to a primary site selection factor. Canadian cities and provinces that understand this and actively compete for these facilities could see their economic identities transformed over the next decade. And the clean energy export story could ultimately be the most significant of all. If Canada captures even a fraction of the green hydrogen market being actively built right now by decarbonizing economies across Europe and Asia, the revenue flows would rival Canada's oil export history at its peak. This is not guaranteed. It requires investment, infrastructure, and strategic clarity, but the foundation is already here. No other country on Earth has Canada's combination of hydroelectric capacity, renewable potential, and freshwater abundance. Here is where honesty matters more than optimism. Having this resource advantage and actually capturing its full value are two completely different things. History is full of countries that sat on extraordinary natural wealth and produced very little lasting prosperity from it. The pattern is almost painfully familiar. The resource gets identified, external interests begin circling it, domestic governance cannot keep pace, and the value leaks out through a combination of inaction, short-term thinking, and political fragmentation. Canada is not immune to that pattern. Water governance in Canada is currently fragmented across provincial and federal jurisdictions in ways that make a coherent national strategy genuinely difficult to execute. The legal protections around water are real, but they are not airtight. Climate change is already affecting Canadian water systems in ways that require serious, sustained attention. Glaciers are retreating. Precipitation patterns are shifting. New drought conditions are appearing in regions that never historically experienced them. The water advantage is real, but it is not unconditional, and it will not protect itself. It requires active stewardship, investment in monitoring and conservation infrastructure, stronger legal frameworks protecting water from foreign acquisition, and a genuine long-term national strategy that treats fresh water as the strategic asset it actually is. Canada has the institutions, the governance capacity, and the environmental awareness to do this well. The question is whether the political will exists to match the scale of the opportunity. Step back and look at the full picture. Every era of global economic history has been defined by one resource that the whole world needed and only some countries controlled. Spices in the 1500s, coal in the 1800s, oil in the 1900s. Each time, the nations that held that resource and managed it with strategic intelligence accumulated wealth and influence that shaped the world for generations. We are entering the era of water, not someday in the future. Right now, the crisis is accelerating. The demand from the world's largest economies is becoming urgent today. The industrial location decisions that will define the next 30 years of global economic geography are being made at this moment. Canada is holding the most important cards on the table. The question, the only question that actually matters, is whether Canada sees clearly enough, moves quickly enough, and governs wisely enough to shape what comes next. Because the world is not going to wait for Canada to figure it out. Stay with Canada Economy. We will be right here tracking every move.